The United States slapping a fresh round of tariffs on goods from 60 trading partners, including China and the European Union, alleging that they have failed to keep forced labor out of their supply chains. The new duties range from 10 to 12.5% and will replace the temporary 10% global tariff, which expired today. In Asia, China, Japan, South Korea, and Singapore are amongst those facing that higher level of 12.5%. But some economies, including Japan and South Korea, might still get some relief with existing trade agreements with Washington. The new tariffs drawing criticism across Asia, China voicing opposition and warning against trade wars. Malaysia says it has taken note of the new rate and will continue to negotiate. South Korea also keen to keep talking to keep tariffs on its goods at 15%. Japan expressing regret, insisting its trade practices comply with international rules. Meanwhile, Australia has slammed the tariff rate of 12.5% on most of its goods as, quote, completely unjustified, saying it will continue to press the US to remove all duties on its exports. The EU's foreign policy chief questioning Washington's reasons behind the imposition of tariffs on European goods. The bloc also saying it expects the US to abide by the trade deal struck last year. And for Singapore, a 12.5% tariff will hit about a third of exports to the United States. Washington ruling that it does not see sufficient measures to block imports produced either entirely or partially with forced labor. The Trade and Industry Ministry in Singapore says it will continue to find options with the US Trade Office and release more details when they are available. The tariff will be implemented. MTI adds that Singapore does not condone the use of forced labor and has a good track record on tackling illegal practices. Singapore, along with 15 other economies, is also subject to the USTR's investigations under Section 301 into the Act's policies and practices relating to structural excess capacity and production in manufacturing sectors. Findings and proposed actions for this investigation have not been released. Still, one analyst says higher tariffs could dent Singapore's competitiveness and trigger wider shifts in supply chains.
There are some governments that have no tariffs as a result. They were not part of the 60 countries, and they then have a comparative advantage because they have zero tariffs on their products. And so it will be an interesting set of supply chain discussions within companies to think about not just what is your rate, but what is your rate compared to your competitors. And in some cases, you're better off, and in some cases, you are worse off.
Jagruti Dave, watching developments for CNA. She joins us live from Washington, D.C. Jagruti, not surprising that U.S. trade partners, 60 of them, would react negatively to these tariffs. But what has the reaction been like within the United States?
Well, Wesu, let's look at what Jameson Greer has said as the justification for these latest tariffs. And he says the United States has had a forced labour import ban for nearly a century and rigorously enforces it. It's well past time for our trading partners to do so. But many Democrats believe that this is the Trump administration being very disingenuous. You've got Linda Sanchez, a Democrat from California, who is saying President Trump isn't serious about combating forced labour. He's trying to make an end run around the Supreme Court and Congress to reimpose his illegal tariffs. Essentially, he's trying to bypass Congress in order to make tariff policy, which is not a power that many experts say that the president has without Congress. And another reason is because the reasons for tariffs have changed. First, it was because of a national emergency that was struck down by the Supreme Court. Then it was the imbalance of payments as a reason for imposing the next round of blanket 10% tariffs. And then, and now when that didn't work, he's looking to forced labor. That is what his critics are saying. You've also got think tanks here in Washington, D.C., like the Peterson Institute, who are saying that it's unlikely that this set of tariffs will also survive a legal challenge, because this is essentially assuming that raising the question is, does the president have the legal authority to determine and implement U.S. tariff policy? And they say the categorical answer for that is no. Congress has not given the executive the power to do that. Now, there are, of course, going to be some Republicans who support the president's position and the rationale for targeting other countries for unfair trade practices, using the strategy that they're using of tariffs to get better negotiations in trade. But there are also going to be a lot of Republicans who are a bit nervous about this because of the potential knock-on rising costs that tariffs can give to consumers. And this obviously is of particular concern as we head to those crucial midterm elections in November.
Donald Trump giving an address tomorrow at the Correspondents' dinner. This was postponed. In April, there was a security breach and has been pushed back to tomorrow for us, today for you this evening. What have preparations been like? What's likely to happen at this event?
Yeah, this is, I think, coming at a time where the security services are warning of an increase in nationwide threat levels since January. And so I think what you will see is increased tightening of security measures. You're going to see parking restrictions. You're going to see road closures. And Wei Zhang, the president of the White House Correspondents Association, was explaining that you're going to likely see more security. It's not clear whether there's going to be increased level of security, because she said that there was a lot of security at the last Correspondents' dinner, and obviously a lot of the security measures in place she's not able to reveal because of security concerns. But she said that there are going to be new things like guests having to register, having a QR code, and having to bring photo ID as part of the measures in place. And we understand there are going to be fewer guests potentially as well. So, as I say, lots of measures in place as there are concerns about a surge in the threat levels since January.
Thanks for that. Jagruti Dave reporting for CNA live from Washington, D.C. The White House says those tariffs imposed target forced labor, some experts arguing that the real intention is to put in place a broader tariff regime that would be more resilient to any challenge.
It's not actually about stopping forced labor or trade in forced labor, despite what the United States claims. It's really about rebuilding a tariff wall of between 10 and 12.5% against 60 of the U.S. largest trading partners, covering almost 99% of all imports into the United States. So basically, you have replaced one temporary statute now for one that is going to be much more longer lasting and much more legally durable.
Economists say affected countries may be reluctant to retaliate because tariffs often end up hurting domestic businesses and consumers.
We do know that the majority of these tariffs are paid by domestic consumers. So any country that retaliates against the U.S. is, putting tariffs on U.S. exports to their countries are really harming their own domestic businesses and their own domestic consumers. So many countries realize this, and that's why we haven't seen large reactions of retaliations in response to any of the tariffs that the Trump administration has implemented.
The latest tariffs also come with significant exemptions. Analysts say they are a continuation of the approach adopted from earlier tariff rounds.
We saw last year when the reciprocal tariffs were rolled back and a lot of exemptions were made after the first set of very stringent announcements, let's just put it that way. The US realized that for a range of items, they either were in short supply or not available at all in the US market, and that was pushing prices up. Industries were complaining, and so they put in place a range of exemptions, which is why the tariff shock for certain Asian economies, and particularly Southeast Asian economies, was not as bad as first predicted. So in essence, they're continuing with that approach.